one of the reasons we can't be sure really how the old chanters were tuned is that most of them have very, very large finger holes. The wedding without a bagpiper in front when you go from the church to the wedding feast was unthinkable.
Hallo und herzlich willkommen bei Pipes for Good Vibes, dem Podcast rund um den Dudelsack. Mein Name ist Kristina Künzel und ich bin Dudelsackspielerin mit Herz und Seele. Hier erhältst du vielfältige Einblicke in die bunte Welt der Dudelsäcke, Gespräche mit anderen Experten, Geschichten aus meinem eigenen Leben als Dudelsackspielerin und eine große Portion Freude am Instrument und an der Musik. Schön, dass du da bist. Welcome to the first podcast of the new year and also to the first podcast in English. Because today I have an English interview partner, or a Swedish one. It's Olle Gällmo, a Säckpipa player from Sweden. Welcome, Olle.
Hello, and nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm very happy that you're here. So you would like to tell us some interesting facts about the Säckpipa, the Swedish bagpipe. And maybe you could first start with the history of the Säckpipa?
Yeah. I don't know how far back to go, but also there's some obscure things in the histories as well that we don't know very much about. The Swedish bagpipe was discovered or rediscovered in 1939 during an evacuation of collections from a museum due to the Second World War. And they found some bagpipes on a shelf, and it was a big surprise. And then they discovered that there had been a bagpipe tradition in Dalarna, in the middle of Sweden. And they found one piper still living, Gudmunds Nils Larsson, and interviewed him. And it was in the nick of time because he died not long after that. So we know things about the bagpipe from the 19th century, from the 1800s. Mm-hmm. And we have found a number of bagpipers that we know by name. Some of them we know more about. We know tunes after them. They have found maybe 20 or so instruments from the 19th century in museums and collections, and in some also in private homes. But before the 19th century, we don't know that much. The oldest bagpiper we know by name from history was born in 1749, but he was most certainly not the first one. And there are much older bagpipe evidence of bagpipes in Sweden than this. There are lots of bagpipes in medieval churches, for example, from the 14th century and onwards in Sweden, but they are in different parts of Sweden. They are in the coastal areas and more city areas and so on. Very far from Dalarna, which was a very rural area with very isolated from the coast. Yeah. So they probably have nothing to do with each other. The bagpipes we can find in the medieval churches from the Middle Ages, they are probably of German origin because most of the painters were German artisans. Okay. And they used templates from Germany. So how the Swedish bagpipe, the Dalecarlian bagpipe, came to Sweden and when, we don't really know. The most likely explanation is that we found it and brought it home during one of our many wars in Eastern Europe in the 17th century. Sweden was making war all the way down to Turkey. And many soldiers came from Dalarna, so they maybe brought the idea or an instrument home from there in the 1600s then. But there are some other stories as well where it may have come from.
Okay.
So there are some other theories of where it might have come from. There is one theory that says that it might have been brought in from Finland, because there were areas where Swedish bagpipes were found in Dalarna, where all of them were had a lot of Finnish immigrants, and they were actually not immigrants before 1809, because Finland was then part of Sweden. But it's not very likely, because I don't think there are many evidence of bagpipes being played in Finland at all.
Yeah.
There's a local story from the 19th century in Dalarna about the bagpipes there coming from a Spanish mercenary. A Spanish mercenary who was caught. He was fighting for the Danes in one of our many wars with Denmark. And there were battles with Denmark in the region in the 16th century or so, because they owned Norway. And a Spanish soldier fighting for Denmark is not very strange, so that could have happened. The respective kings were closely related. And the story is that this Spanish mercenary taught the Dalecarlians to play bagpipes. But this is not as likely as the first theory I told you about, I think. Partly because most Spanish bagpipes today are not the same type as Swedish bagpipes.
No, not really.
But there have been cylindrical bagpipes in Germany too, so it's not impossible.
Yeah,
I think the most likely explanation is that we brought it home in the 17th century or so from East Germany, because we have our closest bagpipe relatives there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really quite late in comparison to the other European countries where the bagpipe was played. And in Germany, I think, it was nearly still over in the 18th. 19th definitely. So
but this area of Sweden was very isolated. A Swedish nobleman or nobility passed through this region in 1829, and he actually went to a wedding there, which he passed by, and there was a bagpiper there. That's why I know of him, because he wrote about this. And about these bagpipes that he found. But the interesting thing he also says is that he traveled through that region of Dalarna, and he could not find a single road or even a track, a wheel track in the whole region. So it was the communication-wise, it was very isolated, this area, from the rest of Sweden, I think.
Mm-hmm. So, and what about the look of the Säckpipa? It looks different from all other, or from many other bagpipes, because of the chanter is really different. Yeah,
there are some things that are peculiar with it. The most obvious is the chanter, since it has these scallops, as they are called, these indentures for the fingers. That is not unique, though. It does exist in other. I have seen uilleann pipes chanters with such scallops, actually.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And also one of the reasons that the Spanish theory is not that very odd is that there is actually evidence of a Spanish bagpipe tradition which also had marked finger holes, not quite in the same way, but still very marked finger holes with rings.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's one thing. I think the scallops may have been developed developed further in Sweden because of the cold, because it's easier to play bagpipes with cold fingers if you can't miss the holes, and you can't miss the holes if there's a scallop there.
Yeah.
So that may be a reason. Another thing that is rather unusual with Swedish bagpipes is that we usually think of it as East European in that it is cylindrical. The chanter is cylindrical and it has a single reed. But most other East European bagpipes, they are made from a whole goat kid or something like that. This is a sewn bag from calf hide. And the drone position is also a bit strange compared to other East European bagpipes. There are not that many other examples. So the sewn bag and the drone position looks more Western than Eastern, so to speak.
Yeah. So for the listeners who don't know Säckpipa, maybe the drone position is in front of you.
Yeah, it's across the breast of the piper. So like Northumbrian small pipes, for example, or the gaita, for example. The Spanish
gaita has it
since
also.
Since we talked about Spain.
Yeah. But only the small drone, I think. But that's another case.
And in Sweden also, there are another peculiarity about these instruments that they found, the old instruments that they found from the 19th century, is that very many of them, a majority of them, seem to have two drones.
Yeah. Okay.
In a common stock, but in all cases, only one of those are functional.
Yeah.
So the other drone is just for show. It's not even drilled through. It's never been making a sound.
Oh, I didn't know that.
In some cases, it's even integrated into the stock. So it's kind of an ornamentation, looking like a drone, but not being a drone.
Okay, that's weird.
So historically, as far as we know, it has never had more than one functioning drone. Okay. But nowadays, we have Swedish bagpipes with more than one drone, of course.
Yeah. So now we were talking about drones, and that, now I would go to the tuning of the Säckpipa, and then coming back to the drones again. Because the tuning of the Säckpipa, what is the traditional tuning of it? How is it tuned?
That's also under debate currently. Okay. Because when the Swedish bagpipes were restored and manufactured again, started to manufacture it again in the early 1980s, they couldn't really be absolutely certain how it was tuned. You can measure the length of the chanter, of course, and think that it should be in this or that tune, in this or that key. But the thing is that the chanters of these preserved instruments, they are not quite the same. And it was assumed that it is cylindrical, because most of them seem to be cylindrical. Some of them are actually a bit conical, but in most cases, I think it looks like it is more by accident, not on purpose.
Okay.
During the manufacturing. But if it were conical, the tuning would be very different. So when it was restored, it was decided to make it cylindrical, 6 millimeter. And if so, the chanter length says that it's probably the 6-finger note is probably an E. There was no 7th finger note at the time. There was no hole for the right hand pinky. So the bottom note was E, and the A is in the middle. And this to play tunes in A with range from E to E suits very many tunes from that area very well. And it's a common key on fiddle as well in the area. So it's also a reasonable assumption that this would be a chanter in A, but with the A in the middle. So the 3-finger note is an A. Yeah. The 6-finger note is an E. So we call that an A chanter, but in most of the rest of the world, you would probably call it an E chanter, since bagpipes are usually called after the 6-finger note, not the 3-finger note. Yeah. But recently, people have started to restore the museum pieces more accurately, including these conicities that has been found in some of them, and then the tuning is very different, and the tone also is very different. So it's actually under debate how how the old instruments were tuned. But when we talk about Swedish bagpipes today we usually use this restoration project from the early 1980s as a norm, so to speak. So in that case, I would answer they were tuned in A, with a range from E to E.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this is still the standard tuning, I think.
It's still the most common tuning, but pretty soon after the restoration, people started making them in G as well, since a bagpipe in G, that is to say then a range from D to D.
From D to D.
Is more convenient to play with other instruments. In many, it's a more common key in the rest of Sweden. So G chanters have been common for a long time. Yeah. But there are nowadays you can find chanters also in F. You can find them in low D, and you can find them in high C and D as well. Very small chanters. Yeah. But if you meet other bagpipers in Sweden, it's very, very likely that they play an EAA chanter. Yeah. But when I play abroad and when I play with you, for example, when I'm in Germany, it's common that I play the DG chanter instead, because people are more used to that key.
Yeah, maybe with other musicians, but if we play with other Säckpipa players also in Germany, it's also EA. So,
yes, that's true. Yeah, that's true. But with
and the fiddle players are happy when we play EA.
Yeah, okay. That's not always the case in Sweden. Okay. But if you want to play with nyckelharpa, for example, then it's a DG chanter is very nice to have.
Yeah. What about the fingering? So today they're in half-closed fingering, the Säckpipa I know, but was it always in half-closed fingering?
No. And that's also connected to this tuning issue, because one of the reasons we can't be sure really how the old chanters were tuned is that most of them have very, very large finger holes, elongated finger holes. So they're oval, along the chanter oval. Yeah. And if you believe that that's as it's supposed to be, then the tuning is one way. But if you believe that this is just these holes are meant to have beeswax in them, so that you can mold, you can retune each hole by moving the beeswax around, then you can retune the chanter quite a bit, since they are so long, these holes. You can move the hole up and down a little bit by moving the beeswax in the hole. But many of them have very big finger holes, and the beeswax is not. If there was any beeswax in them, it's not there anymore. But if there were these finger holes, then the fingering cannot have mattered, because if a finger hole is very large, when you open it, almost all the energy goes out through that hole, so to speak. It doesn't matter what you do with the fingers below that hole. It's when it's open. So therefore, it doesn't matter if you play fully closed or fully open.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would guess that the old pipers played almost fully open. So these standardized chanters that we have today, where we assume that the chanter is cylindrical and 6 millimeter, and the finger holes have these positions and have this size and so on. This standard is a new thing, and therefore I don't think that fingering was standardized either. Yeah. Before they were resurrected, these bagpipes. So I would guess the old pipers played mostly open. We have started to play more closed, and it has become half-closed fingering in Sweden very commonly, because it facilitates staccato playing, doing rappels down to low E, and so on. So it's more for convenience that we have started playing more closed. I myself have changed my fingering. When I started playing bagpipes in the early 90s, I played fully open or almost fully open. But then it gradually closed on its own. It wasn't a conscious decision to change my fingering. It was just naturally happened because I started to play in a way and do tricks like staccatos that made it more convenient to play more closed. Yeah. And there are pipers who play fully closed.
Yeah.
But on most Swedish bagpipe chanters, it's not possible because some of the tunes, in particular the A and the C, will be out of tune if you play fully closed.
So it depends very much from the Säckpipa you have in your hands.
Yes. And also another reason that the half-closed fingering became so common, almost like a standard today, is because one of the big bagpipe makers in Sweden is Alban Faust, who is a German, and he was of course brought up with the half-closed fingering when he came here, and so through his making and selling many of his bagpipes, the fingering has kind of followed with that. But while the other bagpipe makers at that time, Leif Eriksson and Bengt Sundberg in the 1980s, on their bagpipes, the finger holes were so big that it doesn't matter. So there was no one would force you to play fully closed or fully open. It didn't matter.
Yeah. And what about the second thumb hole?
I think that was invented by Alban.
Okay. Also,
I think.
Yeah.
Someone will probably correct me if I'm wrong after hearing this, but I think it was Alban who introduced the second thumb hole. The finger hole for the right hand pinky, the seventh hole, was not there in the beginning because it isn't there on any of the museum pieces. Yeah. But Leif Eriksson, when he reconstructed the bagpipe in the early 1980s, he put a tuning hole below the fingers, and he happened to put it on the right-hand side of the chanter.
Okay.
So pipers discovered that they could actually reach that hole. If they really stretched their little pinky, they could reach that hole and come down to D sharp. The chanter was quite short, so it became a D sharp, not D. And people started doing that. So Leif gradually moved, this hole kind of moved up to become a real finger hole. It was moved up and on the front of the chanter instead of on the side, and became the seventh finger hole. So that was probably Leif Eriksson.
Okay. Yeah, well, interesting. And the tuning of the drones, if we have the chanter in A, you call it A, then the drones are, if you have one drone, traditionally one drone, so the drone is an E, I think.
All the old instruments seem to have an E drone, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And as I said, there's only one functioning drone. So it doesn't really matter how long the other one is because it has never made a sound. But so E drone, that is to say, the functioning drone always have about the same length as the chanter, so it should be an E if you think of the chanter as being an AE.
And in modern times, where you have more than one drone, maybe that works with a function?
Then we use the same drone configuration as you would, I think, for most bagpipes. You would add an A drone, first, and then maybe another E drone or another A drone, depending on what you think. There are people who play with only A drones as well.
Yeah, okay.
Still only a single drone, but in A.
Yeah.
But that's also one thing about the Swedish bagpipe, since it's cylindrical and single-reeded, the effect of a rappel down to low E as a staccato is very strong if you have a drone, which is also an E, because then the low E note will not be heard as a note; it will be heard as a pause.
Yeah.
So therefore, an E drone is very effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think today there are many extras exist, like keys, maybe to have a bit more range of the chanter.
Not that much, actually. There's on the DG chanters, and lower tuned chanters than that, it's quite common to have a key for high E. So one note above the thumb hole. The thumb hole note would be a D on a G chanter, and many of them has a key for an E above that. So the sixth in the scale. But to make a key for that on an A chanter, that would be an F sharp key, is very difficult. The chanter is so short that the key would have to be very, very small and therefore very difficult to operate. I've seen one chanter with a key for F sharp on an EA chanter, but only one, I think. So I don't think there are any more chanters than that one that has that. Again, someone will correct me if I'm wrong. But on DG chanters and below, it's common with a key for an extra note above the thumb hole.
Yeah.
I don't think I have seen any other keys on Swedish bagpipe chanters. Actually, you could think of keys for accidentals in the scale as well. But if you have a chanter in A, for example, we don't have a B flat. It would be convenient sometimes to have a key for that, or an F natural could have been also nice to have. F natural on at the bottom, I mean.
Yeah. The high one above. You can press it up a little bit.
The high one you can press. So that would be convenient, but I think I've never seen anyone actually have a key for that. And I guess people would stop. There's kind of a limitation in that if you start to add keys, too many keys, it becomes something else than a Swedish bagpipe. It becomes too different to what we are used to.
Yeah.
So from a kind of a traditionalist viewpoint, you can't add too many keys without making it something else.
Yeah. So there is a double hole on the A chanter. There's a double hole for the C and C sharp.
That's also an Leif Erikson invention.
Okay.
On the old chanters, there was only one hole there, and it was assumed to be a C natural, so A minor scale. But Leif started to make chanters in major as well. But he had separate chanters for major and minor. So you switched chanter when you wanted to play, when you wanted to switch between A minor and A major.
Okay.
But pretty soon, I guess, he realized that you could make a double hole there instead and cover the upper one when you want to play in minor.
Yeah.
There are also chanters with a double hole for the upper index finger, so that would be D sharp.
Mm-hmm.
They are not that common, but they do. There are some chanters that have that, and there are also some chanters I think who has also double hole for the right hand pinky, so that you can go down to D or D sharp.
Yeah.
But the minor major double hole under their long finger, the upper hand long finger, that's standard. I mean, that's what we expect today.
Yeah. So where was the Säckpipa used traditionally? Was it used for dancing music, really, all the time, or in what cases did they play?
Well, the little we know. People played for their own joy at home. There are not that many stories about bagpipes being played together with other instruments. There are some, but not very many.
Okay.
Weddings, but that is to say the wedding party for dancing, not in church. I don't think the bagpipes were allowed to enter the church. The devil's instrument and all that. But there are some local sayings in this part of Dalarna that a wedding without a bagpiper from church in front when you go from the church to the wedding feast was unthinkable. You would always have a bagpiper with you there. So that's a procession then. So for processions to or from church, and for dancing in the evening, not only during weddings, of course.
Is that the case? Why so many brutmarsches exist in the Swedish music? Maybe. So that was
maybe. I think there's a possible misconception there in Swedish traditional music, in that we usually consider a bridal march and a wedding march as the same thing.
Okay.
But I don't think they actually were. I think to me, a bridal march is a march you play in church during the wedding ceremony, and I very much doubt that bagpipes were allowed there. And also the people in the church had a monopoly on making music in church, so they wouldn't allow that. While a wedding march was to go to or from church, from in particular from the church to the wedding party.
Yeah.
So to me, a bridal march and a wedding march are not quite the same thing, but they are kind of treated as synonymous today. But if my theory is correct, that were actually at one time separate things, you could also think of it as being quite little bit different in tempo. Because if you want to go to the party, you're in a hurry. You want to get to the party, so you play them a little bit faster than you would in the church if it's a ceremony.
Yeah.
But you are right. There are very many bridal or wedding marches in Swedish traditional music, and it's also for fiddle, of course. Most of them for fiddle.
Yeah.
So I think it was very common to play on the way from church to the wedding party.
Yeah. And today is the Säckpipa used more with other musicians, maybe also with other Säckpipa players?
Yeah, one of the reasons why Leif Eriksson wanted to kind of standardize how the tuning was done, for example, as we talked about, was that they wanted to make an instrument this time that could survive, that would not die out again.
Yeah.
So they wanted to make it easy to play with other instruments, more easy to tune, and things like that. So that was kind of one of the goals of restoring the Swedish bagpipe, to make it easier to play with other instruments. So yes, since then, Swedish bagpipes have been played a lot in groups with other instruments, in particular fiddles then.
And for dancing.
Yeah. And nowadays for concerts, of course, as well. But I'm not sure the concept of a concert existed to the 19th century bagpiper.
Yeah.
I think the 19th century bagpiper played just for dancing, or maybe for a ceremony, or just for his own joy at home.
Yeah, I think a lot of bagpipers play just for their own joy today.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
No. It's nice. So we talked so much now about the Säckpipa, and I think you would like to show us a tune now?
I think that we can listen to a track from my solo CD, where I play a tune called Gubbdansen. Gubbdansen would be the old men's dance. It's a tune which is not from the region of Dalarna. It's from Gotland in the Baltic Sea, where my parents are from. And my mother was from a place on Gotland called Bush. And Bush had a famous fiddler in the 19th century, and this tune is after him. And Gubbdansen, old men's dance, when I wanted to record this tune, I thought about this, and what the picture in my head was of these old men trying to dance, and they were maybe too old to be able to dance very fast and so on. So I let that decide the tempo a little bit. So it's not played I play it in a way which is not quite suitable for dancing right now. But I think it illustrates the point.
Olle, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Are there any informations they miss for the Säckpipa maybe?
Well, I must, I guess, say something about my website about Swedish bagpipes, which is which I hope that people can find. But you can link to it, and also if you Google Säckpipa, and you will find it very quickly. It's a website I published it already in 1995, so it's almost as old as the World Wide Web is. Yeah. So it's been around for a while. There you can find all the information really about Swedish bagpipes and their history and how they are tuned and everything like that.
And some pictures.
And some pictures and a lot of soundtracks.
Yeah. So I will link it in the show notes of the podcast. Yeah. And yeah, it was a pleasure to talk with you, Olle. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And yeah, I hope we see us soon. Next year.
Yeah, I will come to Germany next year again.
Yeah, okay. So have a nice time and goodbye.
Same to you. Bye-bye.
Falls du Interesse hast, Dudelsack spielen zu lernen oder deine Fähigkeiten zu verbessern, melde dich gerne bei mir unter moin@kristinakünzel.de. Wenn du auf dem Laufenden gehalten werden möchtest, Informationen zu Kursen und Konzerten oder auch den Podcast zugeschickt bekommen möchtest, dann abonniere gerne meinen Newsletter unter www.kristinakünzel.de/newsletter. Wenn dir die Folge gefallen hat, freue ich mich über eine Bewertung bei iTunes, um sie für andere sichtbarer zu machen. Vielen lieben Dank und alles Gute, eure Kristina.